Main idea in this 30 minutes, it is very difficult to develop everything included in the model. But I do believe we can give a comprehensive view of what the model offers and how it can be useful for companies. Here on the screen, we have some references that we've used to design the model. We've analyzed different reference frameworks regarding innovation. We've also analyzed different self-assessment tools and learning tools. We've included different tools for innovation. We've analyzed different approaches regarding the way in which we understand the macro process of innovation and its different stages. We've analyzed a great part of the documentation regarding innovation and what are the elements that contribute to there being an innovative environment in a business. We've also studied the different approaches that can be used to know what will be the innovation scoreboard. And we've also studied the different ways in which a company can do self-assessment regarding their management of innovation. So, all these references brought together with the experience of the different partners is brought together, and this is what we've used to design the model. Before designing the model, in the previous meetings that took place, we set specific requirements regarding our expectations. And we had 6 main ideas before design. We first of all thought that it should be useful for SMEs, training centers, for local development agencies. We wanted to create something useful for this type of organizations. The starting point was that any organization can be innovative without taking into account the sector or the type of activity that they develop. The third element that we took into account was that we wanted to include anything that was relevant regarding innovation management. Fourthly, the model should offer not only a description of innovation, but it should also offer tools and tools that would be a useful guide for companies so that they could put them in place. So we would tell them not what to do, but also how it could be done. So what we wanted to do from our starting point was to be able to provide support to companies so that they could exploit innovation in their companies and make the most of the possibilities that they have. And finally, and to speak about the philosophy behind the model, I should say that we understand the model as a guide that could be inspiring for the development of innovation. A company is not just something that should be systematically used without taking into account other sources and other tools that also exist and that are also very interesting. So this was the starting point for the design of the model. Once the model was designed, we didn't want to forget that this contributes a special way of understanding innovation management. And that's what we say is the starting hypothesis. And the starting hypothesis that you have on the screen explains how we understand the management of innovation. And it says that for an organization to obtain excellent results in its innovative activity and to contribute value to its customers and all the different interested parties. Well, all of this is developed in a more demanding atmosphere where there's more competitiveness. Therefore, a company should establish or know how to establish or guarantee a continuous flow of innovation. We're not just talking about innovating once, but about establishing a system that would generate innovation in a continuous manner. And to do so, we mainly say that a company needs to set mechanisms to be alert and know what is happening out there that could be relevant for the company. Also, an organization needs to know how to manage ideas and how to make ideas become projects and initiatives. They should also be able to develop these projects and to get value from these projects, because innovation makes sense if it provides value for the customers and the organization. And finally, in the starting hypothesis, we also say that this is only possible when there is real commitment on behalf of the leaders of the organization as well as the rest of staff. So this should all be a part of an innovation strategy framework for the company that should be embedded as part of the whole strategy for the organization or company. So this is how Rainova sees the innovation process. And taking this into account, we've designed the model. As you can see on the screen, we have three parts. We have the standard model, which would be the theoretical part where we identify the elements and describe them in a detailed manner. And we also point out which are the tools that could be used to implement that. Then we have the bridge that is made up by three tools that allow an understanding of the theoretical model or an application of this theoretical model to the specific situation of that company, because the model is not valid until it's interpreted and adapted to the needs of a company. And then we get my model, which is the specific model of each organization. Let's look at the structure of the standard model. First of all, we have the market, which is the starting point and end point for all activity. You can see there the process, the macro process for innovation. When we study this, we see different ways of doing this, but when they talk about getting information, managing ideas, making these ideas projects, and how can they be implemented and become projects that deliver value. We've also incorporated three elements here that we called enablers. We have people in leadership for the organization, because it is people who produce innovation and are behind any innovation process. So we believe that they have a very significant role in innovation management. And finally, we see what's the aim and the idea of the organization regarding innovation and how it allows them to continue to be in the market, providing interesting products to their customers. Another element we've added to the model is everything that has to do with the culture for innovation. We've researched what experts say regarding those factors that allow an organization to be more innovative. And we have a list with many factors and elements grouped in different ways. So we've selected from these. It could be different from this one. but we are convinced that a great part of these elements are really relevant. We will be looking at the structure for all these elements later on. And you see those dotted lines represent the idea that all these elements that are on their own in a real organization will be linked or connected. And whatever you do regarding one of these elements will also have an influence on all the other elements, which is something very important when developing an innovation plan in an organization. So these are the three elements: routines, enablers that were on their sides, and cultural factors. Now I would like to speak about the development of the standard model or the theoretical model. Here we have selected only 3 elements, but in the documents you have in your pen drive, this has been developed. You have a document with contents of all the model. This would be a routine. Awareness, we provide a definition for awareness. We develop that definition, and then we provide the tools that an organization can use to put this in place. In the interactive PDF that you've received, you can access each of these tools and have more information of each one of them. So we described in a detailed manner the element, but the model also offers the tools that can be used to implement it. We have the same structure for the enablers. There's a description, there are different tools provided. And regarding cultural factors, we find the same things. These are the groups, the factors that have, or elements that have to do with attitudes, behavior, values. And then there's another element, which is organizational support. From each of these elements, we've developed the idea. Here we have an example. For attitude, we describe what an attitude can be in the project or in the model. We have an example of one of these elements or factors, and you can also see how we have suggestions for each one of them. For example, for cultural factors, we not only have tools, but we have suggestions or good ideas of how an organization can implement the cultural factor that, according to its definition, it's a bit ethereal. So through these suggestions, we can make it more real, and an organization can start to work on those factors. So let's say we have finished with the theoretical side of things, the elements or the routines, the enablers, and the cultural factors with their descriptions, tools, and suggestions. Now we go on to the next part, and this part allows companies to understand the theoretical model or to adapt it to their own model, which is something that is very important. We don't believe that a theoretical model is a tool in itself, but it can suggest or inspire an organization to be able to define their own model. So this part, the bridge, takes into account different elements to be able to translate that model to their own company. As you can see here, the bridge is a set of tools for diagnosis, reflection, and so on and so forth. The first of them has to do with measuring. Let's see if this works. So the first tool talks about measurements. We understand that the organization should have indicators that allow them to know what the development is. So it is adequate to identify indicators in all stages, which is one of the main ideas. For example, ex-ante indicators before, during, and after the end of the project. And we also need to be aware of how these indicators could be perception indicators regarding the opinion of those that are affected by the process, or objective performance indicators that are gathered by the company. We believed it was also very interesting at this point for the organizations to know what are the elements they need to take into account, or to know how good their results are. Here we've recovered a tool used by a European model, the European model for the management of excellence, and we've used the Redder tool. It's a tool that asks a good question to be able to reach conclusions regarding how good your results are. You see how on the left we talk about how the company should have indicators in all the relevant areas of the organization. Also, the data gathered by the organization needs to be reliable, they need to be available on time, and they need to be adequately segmented to be able to make the best decisions. And we also add that when assessing these indicators or results regarding innovation, we need to consider what's the trend of the indicator to be able to reach the right conclusion, to know up to what point we achieve the objectives, if it's necessary or not to compare ourselves to the development of other companies, whenever this is relevant or significant. And we finally say that an organization should ask itself if the results they're obtaining are a consequence of what they're doing, if there is a cause and effect relationship between what they do and what they obtain. So this would be the first tool as part of the set of tools for diagnosis that are called the bridge. Then we also decide to use a diagnostic tool that allows them to have a partial self-assessment or global assessment for the whole model. We again take into account all the elements in the theoretical or standard model. In the interactive PDF, you have each organization can go to any of these elements, and this would bring them to an Excel sheet, and a working team of the organization will assess that factor. They will reach consensus regarding the situation, and this will allow you to start and to work on a first embryo for an innovation plan. So this is an image that reflects this idea. It is very simple. In this part of the Excel sheet, we describe the elements that the company wants to reflect on. Then the organization, after reaching consensus scores from 3 to -3, and once the organization or the working team has scored, they can generate this spider graph, and now the organization has the opportunity of talking or having a DAFO analysis, or to be able to work on an innovation agenda. Imagine an organization carries out this exercise for each and every element included in the model, and they would be working on their medium and long-term agenda to be able to tackle the issue of innovation. What happens when a company does this? Well, they're somehow drafting their own proposal or their own model. Therefore, from the theoretical model on by applying specific tools, an organization builds its own model or its own answer to the issue of innovation for their organization. Finally, as part of the bridge, we have considered another very simple tool, which is an assessment tool with many questions, with a set of questions that allow you to get out of the box. There are some questions that are focused on innovation, and this can be used in any sphere of the company. We can be talking about a problem in human resources or in manufacturing. So how could we see things in a new way? How could we use this in a new way? What could we move into a new context or process or activity? What could we connect in a new way? What could be changed? What could we create that is truly new? These are some of the questions that can be helpful in a meeting to allow the company to think about things from a different viewpoint. This new set of questions are questions regarding the activities that you're already carrying out. This would allow you to improve what you already do. They wouldn't be out-of-the-box questions, but questions that could help through their answers to improve what you're working on. For example, does this have a logic? Does this make any sense? Has your approach defined a routine? Is your approach focused on the stakeholders? Are you taking them into account? Has your approach been improved over time? Is there evidence that this is so? Does your approach in that sphere make sense regarding what you're doing in other spheres of the organization? And finally, we say, well, is there coherence in what the organization is doing? This could be very basic questions that allow us to introduce excellence into what we're doing. And finally, here we have another set of questions that try and find opportunities. Look at this question, for example. Which is really different and valuable in what you do? Which customers are you really addressing? What are we doing inside the organization? What is going on? Imagine you're in a meeting, you get everyone together, and you ask them, what is going on inside the organization? We will probably have many different opinions and comments. So these are questions that an innovative company should ask. What are we doing outside the organization? To what extent are the leaders supporting the innovation agenda? And how integrated is the innovation in the whole strategy for the company? So here we will finish with the bridge, the simple tools that a company can use to adapt the theoretical model and to be able to draft their own model. And as a part of the project, we thought it would be interesting to have an application guide, a document that would help companies to give this first steps. And we've also worked on a document that brings together all the tools that are mentioned, as well as all the suggestions in the model, because we believe that they can be useful tools for organizations. This would be the structure of the first document, the guide, We start with an introduction and explanation of the model, and then we have a set of recommendations. We try to put ourselves in the place of the company that wants to start and do things, and we tell them, if you believe that you need to change things, maybe you could start by doing these things that, of course, make sense, and that little by little start to be a bit more complex. This would be the first document. And then the other document I mentioned is this one. It's a document with all the different tools that can be used in the model, as well as all the suggestions that have to do with cultural factors throughout the model. And then we reach to the point in which we develop my model. And what is the content of this? Well, it really has no content. We could say that it makes sense, but it has no content. And why is this? Well, because the content should be provided by each organization. So given the theoretical model that you believe is interesting and inspiring, and given the tools to adapt this to your model, you will be able to draft your own model, and there will be as many my models or proposals as organizations.
That's why we say now it's the organization's turn, or your turn, in this innovation journey. So thank you very much for listening.